It's the Weekly Wrap with your host, broadcasting legend Bruce Wolf, and his trusty sidekick, comedian Tim Slagle. And now, without further ado, Bruce Wolf.
Bruce Wolf, no Tim Slagle on the Weekly Wrap. Instead, Tim's taking off his tinfoil hat for a week. Instead, we've got Rick Kaempfer, and everybody knows who Rick is. Rick was the producer for Steve Doll. What year? Steve and Garry, Rick. What years?
From I think 87 to 91 or something like that.
87 to 91. And then for years you were John Landecker's producer,
Yes,
right?
that's right. Mm-hmm.
And when did you play guitar with the Stones? I see a guitar behind you. When did you do
Actually,
that?
that's a Jim Peterick guitar.
Oh, well, of course, you know, Ides of March.
Yes.
One of the last things I did on radio was on WLS when I was the heir to Uncle Lair. We had Jim Peterick and Scott May in the studio, and I got to sing Vehicle, and Peterick just accompanied me. It was great. I just loved it. He was terrific.
Wow.
He was so great. He was so wonderful.
He's such a nice guy.
Oh, you know, and such a superstar. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, really. And who doesn't love the purple hair?
Exactly.
It looks so good on a geriatric. So, so Rick, you've written a book, and that's the one question I should have asked before we went on the air to prepare. It's an oral history of the loop, but I don't know the name of it. What is the name of it?
It's called The Loop Files.
Okay.
An oral history of the most outrageous radio station ever.
Wow. And I helped. I was part of that. So you talked to a bunch of people, and not me, which is fine. You'll put me in the next in the addendum.
No, actually, Bruce, you know, here's the thing. I've been doing these interviews for about 15 years. And really? I've interviewed you 3 or 4 times. And so there are several.
Wait a minute. You have never interviewed me. I have never talked to you. What name did you go under when you talked to me?
I will show you the interviews.
You mean, wait, were they oral interviews or
no, they were. I mean, I interviewed you for Illinois Entertainer.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm the media writer there. I wrote for several magazines. I've interviewed.
All right. Oh, okay. So they were okay. Maybe I did do that. Boy, all I remember is stuff. I don't remember anything past like 1975. So you know, it's an old people's. Me and Jim Peterick, we remember Vehicle, maybe L.A. Goodbye, and nothing since then. But you know, I'm tempted to steer away from the interview and just have you go to your bookshelf and tell me what the books are on the shelf right now.
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a publisher, so
I know that. The Eckert's Press, right?
That's
right. I got the name of the press.
Most of those books are books that I have published myself.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, you have some authors that you helped publish too, like a young Leo Tolstoy came to you and he said, Rick, I've got the title. It's War. Good God, y'all. You say, what's with like War and Peace?
Yeah, this guy named Samuel Clements came to me. I said, that name is never going to fly.
No, right. Absolutely. So, all right. So my producer here, I actually got a producer for this little podcast. And he's great. Chris, he came up with a rundown, and it kind of embarrassed me, humiliated me, because he sent you a copy of this rundown too. And you know, I want to act like we're back and I'm Steve Dahl, and I don't have any prep. I don't have any rundowns. I just want to make fun of Rick saying Lufthansa. That's all he did, right?
Yeah, there was never a rundown ever.
What was it like? So I'll interview you.
Yeah.
What was it like to be the producer for Steve and Garry?
So it was like a high wire act, because basically you had to try to anticipate whatever was going to happen. And if anything went wrong, it was your fault. But you had no idea in advance what was going to happen. So you were just kind of like hoping that everything went well. And if it didn't, then, you know, several 100,000 people were going to hear about it. And so it was quite a motivational thing to.
The thing is that, I mean, you're talking about no script or rundown, and virtually no guests or anything like that.
Well,
I mean, what did you do?
We had a lot of guests.
Oh yeah, you did have some guests, I guess. Yeah. All right.
Because then I knew that, you know, like 45 minutes would be, you know, taken off the roster of things that we had to come up with.
Can you believe? I mean, just think about it. Back in those days, you could have like a 45-minute guest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or more or longer. Or
we had a running rule whenever Albert Brooks called,
sure,
they would just drop whatever they were doing.
Sure, I get it. And he just called and he'd be on. That would be right. Or Richard Lewis, I imagine, although he probably was planned because he'd have a gig in town or something and then he'd come on. Yeah. Right.
Sam Kinison was another one who came all the time.
Can I tell you 2 quick things about Kinison?
Sure.
Real quick. Okay. Because, you knew that I was going to turn this into me. Right.
Yeah, of course.
No, it's not about any of it. I mean, like and I'm also humiliated because look what he's got penciled to talk in about in the next segment. Danny Bonaduce. Like I care about that little guy. I mean, all I remember is Steve and I standing on the Hancock Plaza one day, and Danny was out there, and he was telling us honestly that he was nervous that we were going to replace him on afternoons on the Loop. Okay, I mean that's how paranoid the child star Danny. And then the next segment you got Chet Coppock. I mean, I love Chet. God rest his soul, but I mean, really a minor character. Plus, I've got a story about him that I can't even tell on the air because God will punish me. I will tell you this. I will tell you it's hysterical, absolutely hysterical. But I can't. I can't even believe I'm mentioning it right now. Now, the final segment, you have me and Chet and Steve, but I'll tease you right now with something. Kinison, 2 times, I was doing Chet and Kinison was a guy who made me. I saw him on an HBO special like at 2:00 in the morning one night or early morning, and I mean I never laughed so hard in my life. I don't think I've ever laughed as hard as I laughed at Sam Kinison. And that little giggle, that he had. So he's in the studio once, and I'm doing Chet, but I was doing it like from Channel 32 studios because I was the original guy to do stuff from my closet or elsewhere,
True.
I wasn't actually there, but I'm doing it, and he's doing that little giggle at my stuff. So it's like I'm ready to fall on the floor while I'm doing this because it's like the greatest thing in the world. And it happened another time too. And I don't think it was a courtesy giggle. I think it was like I think he really thought it was funny. And Kinison. And
he was the very first guest I ever booked for Steve and Garry. And it was one of these things where I was in the producer's room, the phone rang, and Sam was on the phone. And I was like you, I was a huge fan of his. And he said, I'll be there at 3:30. Tell Steve and Garry I'll be there at 3:30. So, I walked into the studio, all my chest puffed out. I scored Sam Kinison. He'll be here at 3:30.
Right.
3:30 rolls around, no Sam.
Oh,
okay. 4:30 rolls around, no Sam. And by this time, I was really thinking it was my last day as their producer because they were just spending the 2 hours ripping me left and right. Finally, around 5:30, Sam Kinison shows up, and he knows he's late, so he runs right past me, right into the studio with the live on-air light, and just starts swearing up a storm about all the things. All the terrible traffic he encountered and everything. And the problem was, remember the delay system? You hit the delay button, and it just you have like 7 seconds that it clips out 7 seconds. But when it's a repeated swearing over and over and over again, you can't keep hitting the delay button.
Sure.
So there were several FCC violations.
Oh, okay. That's all right.
Which you're familiar with.
I caused one of them. I know. I was given. Steve and Garry blamed me. I can't remember, and I was. This is how naive I was back then. I actually took it seriously. That they made some kind of comment about some woman who had posed nude for something, and I had instigated the comment, and I can't remember. And Rob
Would you
Feeder,
like to know? Because it's in the book.
Rob Feeder had a headline, Sunday Sun-Times. Remember when people actually read the Sunday, the thick Sunday Sun-Times? And it was something on the order of FCC to doll drop dead, something like that. And they're blaming me for it. And I called Greg Salk, the program director, and I go, Greg, I wasn't. You just calm down. It's a big joke anyway.
Yeah, you know what the fine was? You're gonna love this. The fine was $6,000.
Oh my God! What did they do wrong? They said something.
It was Chet. It wasn't you.
Oh, okay. What did I say?
It was about Vanessa Williams.
Yeah. What did I say?
And it was when the Penthouse magazine magazine came out, and you were doing an impersonation of Bob Costas interviewing her about what it's like to have your tongue in another woman. And that was a violation.
Really?
Yes.
But I swear nothing I said was actionable. I'm sure they took off on it, and they're the ones who said something, but then they blamed me for instigating.
Of course. But if you want to go, it's in the book, but it's also
That's
on
so
the
funny.
FCC files.
That's great.
I actually got the transcript out and read the transcript, and when you read the transcript, you'll see that Chet Chit-Chat, it's very much in the voice of Chet Chit-Chat. It's hilarious.
Why didn't the FCC call on me for oral testimony? And, and I could have read what I said, and they'd say, no, do it in the Chet voice. Oh, I've wanted the FCC. Oh, man.
I get it.
Totally
Oral testimony.
that.
I get that.
I'm glad that you're reminding me of my history here. Because so I'm actually really, all right, way to go, Brucey. Yeah. Little FCC.
You're a rebel.
Huh?
You're a rebel.
Yeah, a rebel. Yeah. All right. So we got a minute to kill here. So but don't you just hate all these egos that you had to deal with? Like, I mean, I'm like the most minor of them, but even I am an egomaniac, and dealing with all of them, what kind of type B or C personality do you have, Rick?
Well, in German, the term is Waschlappe, which
Really?
translates into washcloth, basically.
And on your Lufthansa flight, we'll give you a Waschlappe in case your face gets a little sweaty. Bruce Wolf and Rick Kaempfer on the Weekly Wrap.
Hold on one second.
You listen to me, Jeff. If there are men in my wife's room wearing less than a fucking turtleneck, I will come there and I will shake your foundation. I will shake the fucking rafters. Nobody will be the same.
Bruce Wolf and Rick Kaempfer on the Weekly Wrap. Rick has written a book. What's it called again? An oral history of the loop. The Loop Files.
Yes.
Yeah, about the craziest radio station ever, or the most outrageous radio station ever. Rick was a former producer of the Loop, and later with John Landecker, and he's a publisher, Eckert's Press. You write a lot of books about the Cubs too, don't you?
Yeah,
right? I see on Twitter all the time, and I, try to make jokes about Three-Fingered Brown meeting Alfonso. What was his name? The Six-Fingered guy?
Three-Fingered Mordecai Brown.
Well, this Three-Fingered Brown, and it's another former producer of mine who joked about this the other day on Twitter. It was like Three-Fingered Brown's birthday, but he was nothing compared to Antonio Alfonseca, who had six fingers.
Yeah, that's right.
So
the octopus. They called him the octopus.
There you go. But
it's all in the book, Every Cub Ever.
Oh, okay. You've written about every Cub ever. How much was dedicated to Merritt Renew, one of my favorite Cub catchers of the early 1960s? Is he even mentioned?
He's in there. It's Every Cub Ever.
Who's today? Actually, October 23rd is it's my sister's birthday, for one thing. It's also Johnny Carson, I know, was born on October 23rd.
That's right.
And now I'm looking on this that today, former Cub Solly Drake, who played in the Cubs in 1956.
His brother played too for the Cubs.
Well, who didn't know that? I mean, they were like Paul and Rick Rochelle.
That's right, exactly.
Playing for the Cubs. Anyway, so yeah, you're a Renaissance man.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, well, let's go back to the loop right here and it's on the rundown. So tell us a little bit about the day Danny Bonaduce passed out on the air from drugs.
So this was his first week on the air on the loop. He was doing overnights, and he did like a live remote with Brandmeier somewhere. And throughout the night at a bar somewhere, and throughout the night, people kept giving him drugs, and he was Danny Bonaduce. He didn't have an off button. And so he kept taking them. And Brandmeier at one point said to him, are you going to die? And Danny's like, not tonight. Then he went back to the station and he was on the air and he passed out.
Oh.
And so there was dead air.
Who was his producer at the time?
I think he had no producer when he was
because I would say, this would have been a chance for Rick Kaempfer to say, "This is my chance now. I don't have to be a washbuffer, whatever that washcloth name is. Waschlapper. I could be on the air right now. That's how I'd step in. But no. So what happened? Did they revive him?
Well, so here they called 911 and everything. They revived him. Everything was fine. And then Larry Word came in to talk to him. Larry Word at that time was the boss of the station.
Yeah.
And he said to Danny, "Did you just pass out from too many drugs?" And Danny said, "Yes, I did." And Larry's punishment was, "Don't do it again, okay?" And that was it. I mean, and he said when that was his first day on the air there, he realized there were no rules. He could do whatever he wanted.
You know that he had tattooed like Larry's name on a private part of his body, I believe. Yeah. That's how much he loved Larry.
Yeah.
Because Larry gave him the opportunity. And what else do I know about Danny Bonaduce? You probably mentioned that he had that Larry tattoo.
There's also a Bruce Wolf tie-in. And that is the Danny and Donnie fight.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I watched it on video, and you were one of the main
play-by-play guys.
Yeah,
Below by below. Jack Brickhouse. Wasn't Jack Brickhouse there?
Yeah.
Well, because that's Johnny. Johnny made everything into a Fellini circus or whatever, and but I don't remember getting to say that much during the. But I did.
All over it. You were interviewing Brickhouse and Ben Bentley. Remember?
Oh my God, Ben Bentley was there.
Yeah, and that was your part of the thing. And then then you were taunting Danny. You should see it; it's still out there.
Oh, that's funny.
Taunting Danny, and so Leon Spinks was there.
Oh my God, yeah, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, what Johnny would do. There was one time that Johnny. I mean, again about me. And this was in Johnny's third incarnation on the loop when I really wanted to kill myself because it's like, oh no, I don't want to do, and I was making a lot of money, but it was like, I can't stand it anymore.
Yeah.
But he had like one of the Walendas crossing the Chicago River at a live broadcast, and all the TV crews and everybody was out there to cover it. And Johnny was so consumed with the sound checks and everything like that. And I'm there with, in that time, his news name is a guy named Kent Lewin or whatever. Not Kent. Kent Lewin was the audio guy, but Kent Boss. Yeah. He's consumed with that. Lewin's halfway across the river, and Johnny is still consumed with sound checks. So I just started announcing it, and I actually saved the damn broadcast because it was like you're not even paying attention because other people be afraid to act. It was like, screw this. And so I just started announcing the guy crossing the river. It wasn't that difficult. But no, Johnny would do the crazy stuff like that. And it was so fun. Yes, the Bonaduce, that was one of the original celebrity boxing matches. It was terrific.
Yeah. I think it was the first one that I can remember.
Yeah.
And then Danny went on to fight, like he tells the story in the book, and he went on to fight like weathermen in every market in America. Pay him $10,000 to come in and box like, Joe the Weatherman.
Well, I'm wondering, did Fox get the idea for celebrity boxing from this, or did
I think so, because
because then I got to give Johnny give Johnny credit because Fox did celebrity boxing after this and may have been inspired by this. Because of that, the morning producer on the morning show on Channel 32 wanted me to box the Weather Woman. And it was a no-win because if I win, I beat up a girl. And if I lose, I lost to a girl. So I turned it into a musical where I sang a theme, the Rocky theme. I can't fight Sheila White. She's a woman. It's not right. And then we had it was Johnny style. I had a producer named Jock Headblade. He did it. We had Ronnie Woo Woo as the ring card guy. We had the Harry Carey imitator. We had Jerry Springer as the referee. I mean, it was unbelievable. But when you write the oral history of the Channel 32 morning show, I'll be glad to talk to you about it. I love that. I love that I'm on that video there that my name is right after Jack Brickhouse.
Yeah.
You want to hear a quick Brickhouse story? Johnny on the loop with me and Brickhouse. Johnny used to have me as like the assassin on the show. You know, he knew that I was the backstabber or whatever. So he knew that I did an imitation of Brickhouse having sex. And I mean, I think that I told this on this show last week or whatever, but I said, so he says, yeah, Bruce, do Brickhouse having sex. And I go, back, hey, wee! Oh, I need a cigarette. And then, of course, Brickhouse is on the phone at the time. He's on the phone. And he handled it with class. I mean, he really was. I was humiliated. But
well, there's another story in the book about you with Howard Cosell.
You got that in the book?
Yes.
Tell the story about, because I'd rather have you tell the story than me tell the story about me and Howard.
I don't
Cosell.
have it in front of me, but if this is how I remember it.
Okay.
It was Howard was he was like teaching a class at Harvard or something.
Yeah.
And you asked him
Yale. He was at Yale.
Yeah. And you asked him if people got credit for the class, and he hung up on you.
Exactly. And Johnny loved it because Johnny had just interviewed Cosell. It's one of my absolute high. Johnny recently, a couple of years ago, said something nice about me on his podcast, and Eduardo told me about it. So I wrote Johnny a letter. And that's the thing I mentioned was the Cosell thing. It's like maybe my favorite Johnny moment, because what was Johnny about? Johnny was Borat before there was a Borat. He was always goofing on, he even had the mustache. He was always goofing on people and the pomposity. And so Johnny loved it that first he got the good interview. It was a one-off with Cosell anyway. It wasn't going to be like, it's going to have him on all the time. And then he let me come on, and I said, wait, Mr. Cosell, you're telling us that you teach this course at Yale, and the esteemed University of Yale, on a course on sports? And he goes, yes, I do. And I go, for credit? Click. And Johnny he loved that. That was a classic Brandmeier moment. Got to give Johnny the credit for it, even though I came up with it. So yeah. All right. Now here, the 85 Sky Daniels, a listener came into the Loop Studios and pointed a gun at Sky Daniels.
Right. On his first day on the air.
Wait a minute. Everybody's first day is horrible. Right?
I know. Apparently so.
Okay. What happened?
So he came from Detroit, and he was a big star in Detroit, and he didn't know if he really wanted to come to Chicago. And so he reluctantly came to the Loop. Steve Dahl talked him into it. And he showed up for his first night of work. And Mitch Michaels was on before him.
Sure.
And Mitch had apparently ripped some guy on the air. That guy showed up with a gun, came into the studio, and said, "You ruined my life," and pointed a gun at Sky Daniels.
Oh, my God. And
Sky, thinking quickly, said, wait a minute. Oh, you're talking about Mitch. You know what? Stay here and watch my record. I'm going to go in the other room and get fired. So he had the guy watch his record, which was Robin Trower's Bridge of Sighs, by the way.
Sure. Yeah. Well, okay. Yeah.
And then he ran down to the lobby to get cops to come up and get the guy.
Oh, I thought he was going to retrieve Mitch Michaels for him. So, okay.
He's apparently lied to the guy, which is
yeah, horrible.
But he had really long hair. I don't know if you remember Sky.
Yeah.
He had like hair down to his waist. And he said when he ran into the lobby to get the cops, they pulled a gun on him.
Sure. Twice in one evening.
Right.
Poor Sky. Yeah.
His first day on the air.
Yeah. Why did I come here from Detroit?
Right.
A quick thing. I remember. So Sky, I think Steve then left the Loop and beat Sky in the ratings or something like that. And you know what Sky's reaction was to that?
What?
I'll never forget it. I don't think it was an on-air thing. It was like, oh, well, Marcus died. That was a good ratings grabber.
Oh,
remember Marcus, Steve's producer, who had adenoid surgery and died on the table? And so, I mean, boy, that's pretty cruel. I can't believe I even repeated that story right now.
It's not in the book.
And you know what? I don't think Sky said it. I think I made that up. Sky,
okay.
I don't want okay. Bruce Wolf and Rick Kaempfer on the Weekly Wrap.
Let's see who's on the celebrity line here. Hello, baby. Yes.
Hello?
Hello.
Kevin.
Chet Coppock. Ed, how are you? What's going on, Bertie?
It's Chet Coppock. Chet, how are you?
Big Jim, let me tell you, I'm down here in Sarasota, Florida right now. We are talking about the Taj Mahal. It's magnificent down here, 85 degrees.
What are you doing down in...
I'm kicking around with the White Sox fantasy camp. It's,
Bruce Wolf, no Tim Slagle today on the weekly wrap. Tim is off. We've got Rick Kaempfer in here. He's the author of the WLUP Files. You just saw a clip of my buddy Chet Coppock. It tugs at me. I mean, he died in a car accident a few years ago. He and I, in the later years, we would tweet to each other during Bear games. It was hysterical. And we just, that guy's no Andy Livingston, who good old number 48, who played with the Bears in like 1966 or 4 or something like that. Chet had been to Bear games since the 50s. I think his grandfather had helped bankroll George Halas or something like that.
He was good friends with his father was good friends with George Halas, and Chet had not missed an opening day for like 68 years, something like that.
Unbelievable. And the thing was that how I impressed Chet was because I knew all the uniform numbers.
Right.
Of all the vintage Bears from the 1960s. That's all I know. I mean, that's all I know is uniform numbers of Blackhawks, Bears, Cubs, and Sox from a period of about 1960 to 1968. And my former radio partner, Dan Proft, when we were on WLS together doing the political show, he, just one time said on the air, he said, "Do you know any cultural reference after 1970?" So,
well, that's what I love about you, Bruce, because I'm the same way.
Oh, right. Well, we all are. I mean, it's just, and I don't like it. It's just, that's what we are. I mean, it's, so maybe, there'll be some people who actually want to hear about this cockamamie loop from the 1980s and 90s. All right. So Chet, what did Steve do to Chet one time on the air?
Okay. Well, do you remember this story?
No.
Okay. So, there was a struggle every night at the end of the show because Chet always front loaded his show with his top guests, which, makes sense. But Steve and Garry ended their show doing like 20 minutes of commercials in a row because they had skipped them, throughout the thing.
Sure.
And so every night, they were late. So they give him the show at 7:05 or something like that. This got Chet very angry. I think Dan McNeil famously punched a hole in the studio wall once because he was so mad. He was Chet's producer at the time.
So damn funny.
But anyway, to get Chet back, Steve thought it would be funny to set the harmonizer, which was a gadget that adjusts your voice. And he would use it to be like a Paul Steve. He'd do
Steve and Paul Garry with their cigarettes and everything. Yeah.
Right. And he had I forget what his traffic character name was. But he would use the gadget for this. Well, one day at the end of the show, he set all the harmonizers on every microphone to be a chipmunk voice.
There you go. Yeah.
And Chet came in, and Chet never wore his headphones because he didn't want to mess up his hair.
Of course.
So Chet would sit down, and he would say, like a 5-minute wind up, and it was all in a chipmunk voice.
Oh, God.
And Dan McNeil was across from him, and he had no idea how to turn it off.
Oh, God.
So they were running the hallways. Steve and Garry immediately left, and I was still behind getting ready, for the next day. And so they made me come into the studio and turn off the chipmunk voice. And when I turned it off, I accidentally disconnected all the phones. The whole show, which was the whole show. And so there was that's the chipmunk story. But if you ever get a chance to listen to that clip, it's like a 4-minute wind up to a Pete Rose interview or something in chipmunk voice. It is hysterically funny.
And if Chet had any stage presence, he just would have gone into Alvin singing the Christmas song. But no, he had to be exercised by the whole thing.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it was great. So all right, I can't believe I'm just going by this rundown here. It's so unlike me. But the day Johnny B made Weiser go into a barrel at the rodeo. By the way, You know who was responsible for Jim Weiser being the producer for Jonathan Brandmeier?
Would that be Bruce Wolf?
That would be me. There was I talk about trivia.
Yeah.
Name the Johnny's producer before Jim Weiser.
Oh my gosh.
Steve Stroll.
Wow.
Was his producer. Well, I knew this because Johnny was looking, Steve was leaving for some reason. You know, he had a drop of sanity in him or something. So Johnny was looking for a producer. And I said, okay, I know the guy you got to hire because I know exactly what you need. And I know the guy. And he was my intern. Everybody in Chicago sports, by the way, was my intern at one time or another. Lou Canellis,
Really?
who's been at Channel 32. The guy at Channel 9 right now, name escapes me at the moment because of senioritis, but he was an intern of mine too. Everybody was an intern. I think Floyd Kaempfer was an intern of mine at one point. So
there's another reference.
Jim was an intern, and he was like a Columbia College student. He lived in Oak Lawn, and he would run and get anything that I needed, tape and all that. Skinny kid, and I'll never forget, I lived in Vernon Hills at the time, and he lived in Oak Lawn. And, you know, especially in those days, remember it took a half day to get to Half Day Road back then. That's why they call it that, by horse and buggy. He came all the way from Oak Lawn just to deliver some 20-second stupid soundbite. And I go, what the hell is this guy? So I told Johnny. Johnny hired him. The rest is history because Weiser was a great, great producer for him. And he took... he played the role. I mean, you know, later he actually would become a human being, and somebody got married, had children, you know, all that. But what happened on this particular day?
Well, so Weiser was famous for doing absolutely anything. Like Johnny would say, do, you know, whatever, jump off the bridge, and he would jump off the bridge. You know, whatever Johnny asked him to do. Well, one day, Johnny asked him to go into a rodeo and be in, you know, like a rodeo clown, which is an incredibly dangerous thing.
Right.
And at some point, they put him in a barrel out there with the bulls, and the you know, hit the barrel, and Weiser was screaming hysterically. And Johnny in the book says it was the funniest moment of his entire career.
Well, what's so funny about that? That's torture.
Mel Brooks always says, tragedy is when I fall and hurt myself. Comedy is when you fall and hurt yourself.
Right. No, I get it. I know that. But that sounds like terrifying. I mean, it sounds it sounds like, you know, when he had Piranha Man maced at one time, which is a funny bit.
Right, exactly.
Well, actually, I got another situation in which I got into trouble, and actually, it kind of led to my firing from at Channel 32. You know, I keyed a car at the auto show. Okay, but it sounds worse than it actually was. I was, you know, outside of the auto show, there were these people that I was interviewing about their cars, and I joke with them, "Oh, you want me to key your car for you?" And they, you know, giggle and say, "Yeah." And then I didn't do it at all or anything. But then there was this one guy who was like a Johnny fan. He said he was, "Oh, I love you on Johnny and everything." And I think he sold like artificial limbs or whatever. And he had a Toyota, not a Land Cruiser or something like that. That was a couple of years old, had a little dent in the side. And I go, "Do you want me to key your car?" And he says, "Oh yeah, sure, go ahead, key the car." And then I said, "Are you sure?" He said, "Oh yeah, go ahead and do it." I started thinking, you know, he's a Johnny fan, you know, like Piranha Man and Weiser. This will be his moment in the sun and everything like that. But I wasn't going to do it. Make a long story to truncate it. I said it 5 times. You know, "Are you sure you want me to do this?" He says, "Go ahead and do it." So I keyed it a little bit. And then he starts laughing, and I'm laughing, and a producer off air is screaming like, "What happened here?" And it's all on video. And the guy says, yeah, sure, no problem. He said, "Insurance will pay for it." And I said, "Well, no, not if you volunteered to have your car keyed." Well, they tried to fire me for that. But it's kind of inspired. But give Johnny an assist on that one. All right.
Yeah.
Great moment in my career. Wound up at Channel 5 after that, and, you know, on to greater successes. So, you know, it all turns out at the end. Right. But anyway, so where were we? I mean, yeah, he'd make people do crazy stuff.
Right. But, you know, Weiser said to me, The reason why he felt like he could do anything was because Johnny would have done it himself. Like, he never really asked him to do anything that he wouldn't have done himself. Like, he was constantly like being on the street, in his underwear.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
There's a story about him skiing from the back of a car up Michigan Avenue in his underwear, things like that. But Johnny did admit to me that he never in a million years would have gone in that barrel.
And I think there were certain things that he wouldn't have done. The great thing about Johnny was, there was these unbelievably clownish things, shock jock things too. But he was also, he was like a good interviewer. He was and he was funny about it. And I always thought, he had substituted for Joan Rivers on Fox when she had her, and he was good doing that. And then he tried to be too clever when Fred Silverman gave him his own show. He thought, oh, I can't be another Letterman or whatever. So he tried to do something like totally different. And he just came off as like mean, which, by the way, I was very happy about because, there's another German word for you. Schadenfreude, whatever. It's just, it was just envy on my part. Oh, good. Johnny failed. But he's responsible for, there he is. He was this guy. More than anyone else, he's responsible for all the success that I had. And there's a lot of people that are, Steve and Garry, Jimmy DeCastro, Larry. But Johnny was the guy who did it. It was unbelievable. His first show was in my law office. Very first show.
Story, which is also in the book.
Oh, it's unbelievable. People will just have to go and
basically
read
the Bruce Wolf story.
It's really, and I managed to turn everything into me. Bruce Wolf and Rick Kaempfer on the weekly wrap.
I want to tell you the games of the 24th Olympia from ancient Greece to now. 24 Olympics, one Olympiad every 4 years. Yep, that would about cover it from ancient Greece till now. From Athens to Asia, from Jim McKay to Brian Gubble, from the luge to Greg Luge Enos. But don't get me going to that guy's Enos.
Bruce Wolf and Rick Kaempfer, author of The Loop Files, story of a weird station in the 80s and 90s. Substituting for Tim Slagle today. Yeah, so we just saw or heard this Chet with Steve and Garry thing. You tell me what's the origin of Chet. As far as you understand.
So I believe, and tell me if I'm right about this, I believe that Chet originated at WXRT before you came to the Loop because you had to introduce yourself. And you felt weird introducing yourself, so you created this character that then introduced you, and that's
basically that was it. And of course, and it is based on. Well, I'll leave that up to you as to who it's based on. But all I can say is it was based on my anger at hearing this guy on with Steve and Garry that they would make fun of all the time, and I'd say I could do that. So, but it's interesting in its original incarnation. Imagine a record that's supposed to be a 45 going at about 16 speed. It was really slow when I originated on WXRT, and then it got so fast that I couldn't even follow myself. So, but yeah, it was.
Well, there's a story in the book, Bruce, about I actually talked to Reed Pence. Do you remember Reed Pence?
Reed was I actually know somebody who worked with Reed for a number of years with Shel Lustig. Do you know Shel Lustig?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
They did these syndicated health strips or something like that for radio for years. And I know this woman who worked with Reed. But I remember Reed was like Buzz's assistant news guy at the Loop. Yeah.
And he said that when you first started at the Loop, you guys had like a session where you mined him for every Chuck Swirsky-ism that he ever said, and wrote them down, and you took notes, and they started incorporating in all of your scripts.
The thing, for example, just to give you an idea, how genius works. and you could probably talk to Leonard Bernstein and see how he got things from Rachmaninoff, and but here's how the creative process works. It's So Chuck Swirsky, they had him on Channel 9 doing weekend news sports. And after every home run, and I mean every home run highlight, he'd go boom, boom, every home run. So I just turned it into Boom Shakalaka, which of course I got from Sly and the Family Stone.
Yeah.
But I swear, Rick, I popularized that word.
I think you
Think
did.
about it. Early 80s, people had forgotten about Sly and the Family Stone song. That song was like about 12 or 13 years old. It had receded.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I'm seeing it like on the first video games and things like that. Like I know they listened. I've heard people who've told me, like famous people, who once said like they grew up listening to me. Who's the guy from the Smashing Pumpkins?
Oh, Billy Corgan.
Billy Corgan. I was on a Fox show. Oh yeah, I grew up listening. Oh yeah, really?
Isn't that something? I'm sure it's true.
Right. So, but Sly and the Family Stone did come up with Boom Shakalaka, but I popularized it.
Okay.
Ding Dong Dilly of a Dinger. I'm sure you want to know about that.
I do. I'd love to.
Oh, I mean, who doesn't?
Yeah.
So Red Rush was the announcer on White Sox baseball on the radio with Bob Elson, and he would say his idea of creativity was to say, that's a dilly, or something like that. I go, so a home run's a dinger. I said dilly of a dinger, a dilly dinger. That's a ding dong dilly of a dinger, which I used for every highlight package I ever did on television, every baseball one. The first home run would be Boom Shakalaka, because it was nothing but, I called it sports pornography, because there's nothing but scoring shots.
Right.
It's the worst thing in the world. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And so the first homer, I would say Boom Shakalaka. The second one would be Ding Dong Dilly of a Dinger. The third one would be Descartes. It might be, I think, therefore it is a home run. It was Descartes and Harry Carey. And then if there was another one, it'd be a quadruple. And then of course the Grand Slammer. Do you know what I would do with the Grand Slammer?
Oh,
and Rick, really, you call yourself an aficionado.
I'm sorry.
It would be the Grand Slam. Thank you, ma'am. Suffragette City. Every single time. So I mean, I was trying to spoof myself too, because it was
giving away all your trade secrets here.
Go right ahead, take them. They're in the public domain. It's fine. So
there it is. Boom Shakalaka.
There we go. Boom Shakalaka. So yeah, it has on here Steve and Bruce WMVP. I may say, I right on here. Do you have anything about that?
Yeah.
And what do you have about that?
So there's obviously the Steve and Garry breakup is a part of the book.
Yeah.
And then Steve was kind of floundering for a while.
Yeah.
And then Larry Wirt said something to the effect of, you know how you have two goldfish and one goldfish goes away and it looks lonely and it needs another goldfish? Bruce Wolf was the second goldfish.
I actually remember reading that quote from Larry in like the Tribune magazine or something like that.
That's right.
And it's funny because I had left the show.
Right.
I had left it because what had happened was they had switched to the mornings. And it was one thing for these guys to make me sit around and wait to do two sportscasts in the afternoon, which, I could do stuff in between. This was like they wanted me on every hour. It was like I had to listen to the whole damn Steve and Garry show. And if you think I wanted to listen to that goddamn stuff all morning, every morning, forget about it. So as a matter of fact, so I would do it from my basement. And I remember one time Steve even saying to me, hey, where were you? And I deliberately did not come to the microphone for like 20 seconds. I just sat there and I said to him, Steve, I was just retrieving a story on my AP wire machine that I have here in my basement, which of course I did not have, but he was so credulous. He actually believed me.
Wow.
Okay. So, but we broke up. I left. I couldn't stand it. And I started working with Kevin. Okay. And then the breakup occurs. Right. And then there's a Christmas party, and Steve comes up to me and shakes my hand at the Christmas party. And you know what? I worked with him for 2 years. It was like the days of wine and roses. The first year was like the greatest thing in the world. It was fantastic. And then it just started turning south. But it's still, I look back at it as like, I call it the third best thing I ever did. The best thing I ever did was the last thing that I did was the show with Dan Proft. I got to be the leader. It was a political talk show, but funny as well. And guy's really smart. But it was, this is my show. Second best thing was this Barely Today thing that Larry had me do at Channel 5, which didn't make it through the second trimester, but it was the sweetest thing in the world. It was great.
I watched that every day.
Oh, thank you. Did you like it?
I loved it because
I
was the Landecker's producer at that time, so I was getting up early.
Okay, we did that show, Rick. It was a news show, and we were waiting for the Sun Times and Tribune to come in, but they wouldn't come in till like 5:30 in the morning, right. And it was and I would have a headache because I didn't get enough sleep. It was 4:30 in the morning, but it was still. I used to actually. It's one of the few things that I ever watched myself do because I'd come home and watch it, and I would just laugh. And I would say, "Oh, geez, I'm so sweet and adorable."
And I loved me.
No, I loved me, and I used to call it the sweet show. It was great. I loved it. Yeah. But all of that, none of that would have been possible without working with Steve, being both the sportscaster and the 2 years that I spent with him doing the show, because he was my mentor. Steve was the guy that taught me so much about everything, about how to do a radio show, how to tell a story on the radio, how to turn the wheel, the lazy Susan around and around and around so that you keep coming back to the coleslaw, because you can't be original 4 hours a day. And so I mean, he's very important to me.
Well, I will say in the book, Bruce, I must have interviewed you before you were on with Dan, because at that time you called it the second best thing.
Okay. Well, there you go. Because Barely Today but all those things were built on being able to, I'm working with Steve. And because once you've worked with Steve, you know what it is. Once you work with Steve, I mean, was Landecker that tough after you worked with Steve?
No, not at all. Landecker was a piece of cake.
We hired, Dan and I on our show on WLS hired Pete Zimmerman to be our producer. Yeah. And I remember he's sitting down there and in the interview and Pete's like basically a leftist who listens to MSNBC. And I said, I don't care. Yeah. I don't care. He worked with Steve Dahl for 14 years. Any guy who survived 14 years with Steve Dahl. And he was. And Steve was, and Pete was a great producer for us.
When I left Steve's show and went to Landecker, and I went into the meeting with Harvey Perlman, who was the general manager at the radio station WJMK.
Yeah,
I was afraid that he was going to think I was just this idiot because they talked about me all the time. And he said basically what you just said. He goes, "If you lasted 5 years with Steve Dahl, we're going to hire you."
And you know what, Steve? I hope he watches this, because first of all, he'll be reminded of how he used to say Lufthansa, but he will also have learned. What is the word for washcloth again? Waschlappen and Schadenfreude, and and it's gonna help his podcast.
Yes.
But anyway, hey, so the name of the book, this oral history again, is the Loop.
The Loop Files.
The Loop Files, and it sounds like a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun talking to you, Rick. And what's your next Cub book going to be about?
Well, you know that when you write a book called Every Cub Ever, you have to update it every year because, opening day, there were 13 players that were not in the book. So,
well, I mean, that's a book that just keeps on giving. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's true.
Greatest moment in the history of Chicago sports? What would you say is the one single greatest moment in the history of Chicago sports?
When the Cubs won the World Series.
But what is the one moment that is the greatest moment in the history of Chicago sports?
You have an answer for this, don't you?
Well, it is when the Cubs won the World Series.
Yeah.
And I'm not even a Cub fan by nature, but it's Chris Bryant standing there smiling, poised to throw to first base.
Yes.
In that nanosecond, it's everything.
Yep.
You don't know if he's going to throw it away, if Rizzo's going to catch it. He's smiling. It's triumphant. It's everything. It's 108 years all rolled into one. Yeah. There's nothing better than that. And thanks for rolling in the 4 or 5 good years that the Loop had into a book. Okay. Rick Kaempfer, thanks for joining us. Bruce Wolf on the Weekly Wrap.
And that's the Weekly Wrap on radio and television. Follow Bruce at Bruce Wolf Shy on Twitter and Tim at timslagle.com. The Weekly Wrap with Bruce Wolf, a CP Pods production.